Actually, today I took one council memo for approval by the council, and that was to do with strengthening the custom service. As you know, I have the honor of chairing the board of customs, and so it fell to me to take before the Federal Executive Council the requirements by way of equipment, by way of security gadgets, and so on and so forth, and I did that. But I'm sure it's also expected, and it is my pleasure to also say a few words regarding what I would call the current conversation regarding government finances, regarding borrowing, debt, and including ways and means. I gave the council a verbal briefing that I am giving now, and I'll start by saying that when we interrogate the figures over the first quarter of this year, starting the end of December and end of March, if we want to be positive, what we will say is that the glass is half full. We are halfway there. If not, we can be negative and try and say the glass is half empty. Why do I say this? The debt stock, the total debt stock of Nigeria in US dollar terms fell by 15%. That is very positive. Any rating agency, any creditor, any investor looking at that will see it as a positive move. We are a country that has petrodollars. We have ability to earn in dollars. So it's highly relevant that we look at what is our exposure in dollar terms. On the other hand, given the exchange rate movements, even though there was like an 8 trillion increase in actual debt issuance, the total debt stock, when you count domestic debt, which as I said, there was increase in issuance. When you count the total external debt and domestic debt, and in Naira terms, it has increased by 25%. But that's mainly due to the foreign exchange movement, which can change tomorrow, as we know. Linked to that is the all-important question of the government's capacity to pay its way. Debt credit is all about the revenue to service, and of course, to use those funds properly, judiciously, accountably, and in a way that gives positive returns. I can say quite categorically that under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the federal government does not rely on ways and means in order to fund itself. At no time have we gone to Mr. President and requested permission to seek funding from central bank to pay anybody, be it external debt service, be it share capital cash calls, or any other of the liabilities that the government has. As with all agencies, we are focused on ensuring that the revenue that is due to the federal government is collected robustly, using technology, avoiding blockages which manual processing can cause, and it has led to a very robust revenue effort. And likewise, we are implementing debt or expenditure controls, also very ably empowered by technology. And so within that context, what we have is that we had a legacy. Mr. President inherited a legacy of 22.7 trillion in outstanding ways and means which have been securitized on the eve of the entry of President Tinubu's administration. Naturally, we are auditing, we're doing a forensic audit and interrogating that figure because it's a liability which we have to pay interest on. So any deficits that you might see to the ways and means, to the consolidated revenue account, may be automatic debits on a figure that is still being interrogated. But as a matter of fact, the current ways and means deficit is 3.4 trillion naira. And yet, as I said, we collect the operating surpluses of revenue-generating agencies by law under the Fiscal Responsibility Act and other legal guidelines. And when we look at how much is outstanding and how much is owed, we are actually positive. The amount that is owed and that we are claiming far exceeds the 3.4 trillion in ways and means. And as I've said before, we do not rely on ways and means to pay salaries. We don't rely on it to pay debt service, external debt servicing, or other obligations. That is the situation. The finances of Nigeria have been revamped. The glass is half full. On budget performance, yes, we are at half year. You know, it is transparency, accountability, and the systems that we have in place that have allowed us to look at what the Debt Management Office produced by way of quarterly reports that give us data that we can interrogate and review. And in terms of budget performance, as I say, it's the remit of my colleague, the Honorable Minister for Budget and Economic Planning, and I'm sure that in due course, he will give us the status. Needless to say, we should remember that there has been an extension of the 2023 capital budget as part of the activity of 2024. In terms of income, revenue, yes, the commitment and the desire is to very much diversify away from dependence on oil and even fossil fuels, oil and gas, in line with the trend in the world. But the reality is that as an oil and gas nation, we need to use our resources to develop, to industrialize, to bring our people out of poverty. So there must be a realistic approach worldwide to the issue of climate change, climate action, and even transition, as they say. That being that, we also, in the short term, and it will come back to the issue of inflation, we have no business producing below our OPEC quota. We have no business allowing theft, losses from the oil sector, which reduce the revenue, particularly the foreign currency revenue that could be accruing to Nigerians at this stage. So the effort is to increase, in the very shortest term, oil revenue, oil production, and the foreign currency that brings. In terms of the financing that's available to Nigeria at this stage, we have talked about how we have refocused and re-engineered the revenue side. And part of that process is change management technologically wise, and that will bring us I'm sure in the very near future, into a stage where we have visibility and transparency and the ability to report in a very open way on what the state of the finances are in terms of revenue and indeed in terms of expenditure. But part of what I would call the progress that has been made has not just been in mobilizing domestic resources. Charity begins at home. And we have done that, and we are doing that as an ongoing team effort. But in addition, the reforms of Mr. President have brought support from around the world. So the multilateral development banks and development partners that have concessional funding, 1% per annum for 40 years, or even grant money, they have come to the table, as you've seen in reports, they have come and they have supported the reforms, ongoing reforms, in an effort to help us ensure sustainability of the effort, given that it has the economy going in the right direction. It is growing. It is growing at a rate higher than population growth. When we turn to the issue of inflation, there is nothing more uppermost in the mind of Mr. President and indeed his entire administration than the elevated food prices and the issue of availability and affordability of food and even nutrition. My colleague, Honorable Minister for Health and Coordinating Minister of Social Welfare, and indeed his Minister of State, are totally focused on the fact that we have an issue with nutrition. Young children needing to get enough nutrition to ensure that they do not now have stunted growth and all the negative consequences. But in addition to that, an important side by side with that effort at nutrition is the determination to bring food availability, to get food prices down, to have a good harvest, and in the meantime, to help provide support, provide direct food to the population, as well as the ability to buy that food through direct transfers. The direct transfers process is being ramped up. It improves every day and it speeds up every day with the ability of government to identify those who are the poorest and the most vulnerable according to the social register and to deliver to them one way or the other digitally to either their mobile wallet or to their bank account identified through the BVN, so that funding goes out to people to allow them to have the choice of which item or food or whatever else to buy. So those social interventions are now at the forefront. The path to growth of the economy based on stabilizing inflation is projected to come down, and we can expect it to come down. A good harvest will help with that. Growth will help with that. The exchange rate is stabilizing, and with more reserves coming in, it can be expected to appreciate. That will bring down interest rates or give a chance for interest rates to now come down, for the monetary authorities to ease off, tightening as a way of squeezing out inflation. And that's the path to growth. And the Honorable Minister of Works, I'm sure, he will take you through some of the core infrastructure projects. Earlier today, I had the privilege of being alongside the Minister for Communications, Innovation, and Digital Economy as he met stakeholders, development partners, the private sector, to discuss the 90,000 kilometer fiber optic highway or backbone that he's embarked on putting in place, and thereby providing key infrastructure for the digital economy, for technology, for young people, for jobs. So the setting up of the economy to put down the infrastructure that will lead to growth. You put infrastructure, you get growth. That is going apace. But the most uppermost and the most important thing on Mr. President's agenda now is the issue of food, food security, nutrition, affordability of food for Nigerians, and is working day and night to come up with not just the longer term, but even the interim measures to help in that direction. The Eurobond is one of the financing options available to Nigeria. The market, we believe, is open to us, and we can tap it. However, under executive order, we have, just as in the same way that we relied on domestic resource mobilization, bringing in all the revenues that are due to government in a timely and efficient manner, we also have access, and we have in the process of issuing a domestic dollar-denominated bond. The top brains and skills in the Nigerian financial markets are at work, challenging themselves to mobilize and gather Nigerian diaspora funds. And when I say diaspora funds, I mean people living in the diaspora buying into the Nigerian story, Nigerians living abroad, but also Nigerians that are holding funds abroad. We are putting in place a bond issue targeted at them that can attract them to buy into what is going on in Nigeria, as well as give themselves good returns. Let me say, for the avoidance of all doubt, there is no intention and there is no targeting of domestic domiciliary account funds. That is not the target of this domestic issuance of dollar bonds. It is funds that will come from outside, of which there are plentiful. There are Nigerians living abroad holding dollars. There are Nigerians living in Nigeria holding accounts abroad. And it's a competition for those funds, which are earning relatively low rates. And especially for Nigerians who look at what is going on in the country and want to be part of it. And so it is a coming of age of Nigeria as a financial center, or at least it's a first step in that direction, but an important one, not just for Nigeria, but for Africa, that we should be able to mobilize resources from abroad, but not always relying on the international financial structure. So one after the other, the Eurobond market is open to us, and it is an option, but we're doing things serially and starting with a domestic issuance of US dollar denominated bonds. Thank you. I think as you know, timing, pricing, size of a financial issuance, whether debt or equity, is very much a function of the timing and the advice of the financial advisors.